Hello everybody and welcome back to my art journal swap series for 2018. This episode I am doing a collaboration with Lolly Palooza. Lolly sent me a whole lot of die cuts back in January and I couldn't get to them in February because that was my design team, my creative team project month. So I think what I'll be doing is doing an art journal swap every other month, which coincides with my month off from my creative team duties. So I'm opening up these gorgeous die cuts, which she packed so lovely in glassine bags, and I'm trying not to tear them. I'm working in a watercolor journal which I made myself. I have a DIY tutorial for you if you're interested in making one yourself. Really easy, you don't have to go out and buy some of those expensive journals. Sometimes all you want is to play and get your style going before you invest in one of those expensive journals. And sometimes working in a smaller journal is also a little bit easier than working in those big ones. So I decided to make one myself, and I hope you give it a try. It's really good. So I'm starting off looking through each of the packages, just seeing what's talking to me. She sent a whole lot of different things. There's a camera one there, cats, coffee, but once I got to this one here, I knew that this was what I wanted. So this is the Eiffel Tower, and with it she included the world. So it's a die cut of the world, and I kind of got an image straight in my mind, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if this was actually a moon and you have the silhouette of the Eiffel Tower against it? And so I thought, well, I don't have to use it as the world. I can just use the shape to inspire me for this to be like a full moon and then the Eiffel Tower caught in a full moon. So that's the image I went with. I go away and I come back with masking fluid. I've had this masking fluid from Winsor & Newton for ages, and this stuff never goes off. It just always smells bad. If it smells bad, it can't go bad, I figure. And I've got one of my old ruined brushes. Now this stuff is toxic, totally toxic to brushes, so definitely keep it away from anything that you love so much. So what I did was I sketched a circle around the world die, and then I applied this mask with my brush. I'm gonna leave it to dry for a little while, and I'm gonna leave it to dry naturally. I'm not gonna use my heat gun on it, and I set it aside because now I want to work on the Eiffel Tower. So the Eiffel Tower is an amazing metallic structure, so of course I need to emboss this with a gunmetal embossing powder. I'm applying Versamark. I'm going to apply that on there and then add some of this embossing powder by Zing, and I am going to heat emboss this. So the next thing I do, I need to get a color palette. I really quickly went through my phone and I Googled moonlight in Paris, and this photo stood out, and this is exactly what I had in my mind. I just didn't know what colors I wanted to choose, so immediately I thought purple and dark navy and black is perfect for what I wanted. And I knew as soon as I had thought of that palette that I needed to use my Dina Wakley scribble sticks. These scribble sticks are so full of pigment. I really love them, and they have the blackberry, the night, and the black pigment sticks that I think I need to make this background. So after I've laid down the color, I am just using a spare amount of water. I don't want to get my journal soaking wet, and I am just mixing the colors here. Wherever I don't have enough pigment, I'm either touching my paintbrush to the stick or applying the stick straight to the journal. But you do have to be careful because you will leave marks where the, I don't want to say crayon, but where the crayon touches or digs into the paper. So I do prefer to touch my wet paintbrush to the scribble stick. Remember at this early stage that all you're doing is adding color, not really worried about blending as much, not really worried about brush strokes as much. We're just trying to get that first layer down to create a mood and to set the scene for your art journal layout. I'm adding a little bit of darkness around the moon, just so that it accentuates the starkness when you pull the masking tape off. What I'm also doing is I'm using my flat brush and I'm pulling strokes away so it looks really radiant, like there's moonlight rays coming off the moon. I'm then grabbing some gesso, and with a stiff bristle brush and no water whatsoever, I am just adding some gesso texture and thickness and brush strokes, and just trying to get a grungy background happening. I'm then going back in with a little bit of color to blend the outsides and create like a vignette almost. And then using the gesso to soften those edges. This is really an intuitive process. I am really enjoying it at this stage, and I'm going back and forth between all three colors, building layers, building the background, and really just enjoying color and paint. I come back now with a stencil, and I'm just using a little bit of Victorian Velvet Distress ink. I really wanted to create some texture in the background, but I wanted it to be really subtle, and I wanted it to fade into the background and not stand out. You can see it here, really, really faintly, just creating a little bit of texture in the background. I then go back in with my small script rubber stamp and some archival jet black ink, and I'm just adding to that background. I then have this punchinella, and I'm just applying circles here, there, and starting now just to get a feel for what I want to do with my background. This is my most favorite part of all. Time to reveal the stark white of the moon. And although I hate this stuff, I love what it does. That's why I keep going back to it. Okay. Here we go. Here's the moon. I grabbed my Prima Decadent Pie. This is metallic and it's gorgeous. I use this for skin colors and creating any metallic glow. And of course, it is perfect for the moon. The moon's surface is not even, and it's not just one color. So here I just pretend and I play that I know what the moon's all about here. So this is my attempt at creating a moon. It is now time for the Eiffel Tower to go on. I do make sure that the moon is dry before I attach the Eiffel Tower with my PVA glue in my fine applicator bottle. So far I'm loving how this is looking. I then have another look at the photo, and you can see on the left hand side there that there's a little bit of foliage from, I guess, the angle that the picture was taken. So I look through my stash and I find this die cut of a tree, and I thought at first that I would use half of it and ink it up in black, but then I decided that I would use it as a stencil and actually frame my layout with this tree stencil, and I actually love how it turned out. So I start off by stenciling the tree in, and then I take that inking all around the edges of the layout. I really love how this turns out. I love how the structure of the Eiffel Tower is quite holy, so to speak. Same with the punchinella. I love how that circular pattern picks up that texture of the structure from the Eiffel Tower. it's now time for my sentiment. And really, my sentiment came from my head. I thought to myself, I've never been to Paris. Wouldn't it be wonderful to just go, come on, honey, we are going to go to Paris this weekend. And I know of people who just decide to go to Paris for the weekend. And wouldn't that be so wonderful? But unfortunately, we're not one of them. But I would love to go to Paris one day and say that I have seen the Eiffel Tower and, sit up amongst the people of Paris and get that feeling for what it's really like. I find this scalloped border and I decide to put it on top of and beneath the sentiment to frame it a little bit better, and perhaps also tie in the gold from the moon on the right hand side. I then go back in and I thicken up my letters just a little bit. I love how I made the lowercase letters as large as the uppercase letters. I'm really enjoying practicing my lettering this year. The next thing I wanted to do was I wanted to add some of these Tim Holtz clippings. I think that adding these clippings adds more to your story. So my layout is saying, let's go to Paris, adventure awaits you, embrace the journey, and live your life. And I hope that it evokes kind of like a positive, a hopeful trip in the future that whoever looks at this layout will want to hope for or dream for or work towards. So at this stage, I'm feeling like my layout is done. I take off my bulldog clips and I just fill in some of the colors, and I feel like this is ready. And the next day I go into my art room to check out how my spread looks, and I decide that it's not enough. I promised myself this year that I was going to evolve my art. I look at this layout now and I think, yeah, that's just my style. There's nothing really too spectacular about it. Sometimes you look at other people's art journals and they're like, wow, they're so amazing. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to be brave. What's wrong with this layout? I feel like the Eiffel Tower is floating and is not grounded. I feel like there's nothing at the bottom there to ground it to the bottom of the layout. So I thought, what if I grab this stencil, which is from Kaiser Craft, and it kind of looks like roads or like a pattern in a pathway. And I thought, well, I'll just stencil that on and see if that grounds the Eiffel Tower to the bottom of my layout. So I do that, and I think that looks really good. It's a good start. I'm not entirely happy with it yet. The next thing I do is I find this set of border stamps that I hardly ever use and I need to start using more. I ink it up with some cool graphite ink by Ranger, and I decide that it leaves too much of an edge, so I took it off the block and I decided to just use my hands to add the pattern. It's a beautiful flourish pattern, and it actually adds a lot of dimension and a lot of feeling to my layout. I then decide that it's not enough, and I use my black ink and I repeat it. And I thought, that looks really nice. Really, this should be gold. It's like we're thinking about Paris, we're thinking about chandeliers and opulence and ballrooms and stuff like that. So I ink it up with Versamark ink. And I think I pressed way too hard. When I dump the gold embossing powder, it just sticks like one sheet. So I use my paintbrush and I take that all off. I then take some of this off here as well because I feel like that is not a nice print. I love how it printed correctly on the left-hand side, so I decide to heat set this on the left-hand side, and I was going to give the right-hand side another go and being more careful as I pressed my stamp into my layout. So here we go. I'm trying to be more careful and stamping a little bit lighter with my Versamark. I'm going to add my gold embossing powder. And I flick off as much gold embossing powder as I can. And I brush away some of the gold embossing powder that's stuck to the Eiffel Tower because I don't want it to meld with that structure. I'm heat setting this now. It looks beautiful. I love the gold on the black, but as it sets, I'm thinking that it's detracting from the Eiffel Tower, and I feel like I've made a big mistake here. Okay, so that gut feeling is telling me something's wrong. I do find a little charm here, a bicycle charm, and I think it's perfect. I don't want it to go there because there's just too much gold. I put it underneath the left-hand side there. Let's go to Paris. How else but a bicycle? But you know what I mean. I think it's perfect there. I'm gonna add it on that side to balance out the gold. I hold the charm down with a bulldog clip and I grab my white jelly roll pen and I decide to stencil around the tree. Why I started doing this, I don't know. I felt like perhaps I missed out on a step, like a doodling step. So I decided to do that, and then I decided to do these 3 dots, which in hindsight I really hated. And I am about to go back and just totally remove these. This is what happens when you craft on 2 separate days. When you craft on one day, you get tired and you stop doing stupid things. But when you craft at the start of the next day, you're like all gung-ho and ready to add every single thing, which really doesn't need to be there. So sometimes it's better to finish your art journal on the one page so that you're in one frame of mind. But then again, sometimes you need that fresh look. So I go back in with my fingernail and I take off a lot of the embossed gold that is up around the top of the Eiffel Tower. I then grab the Dina Wakley Blackberry stick and I just add as much color on top of where the gold was, and I try to make it look like the gold was never there. So I'm now blending it into the background, and of course you're gonna have to do most of that background because it looks like you've gone back in with a fresh set of colors. Basically, I'm just trying to redo the background to make it look like it's blended enough. I cover up as much of the white dots that I added earlier as I can. They do end up fading into the background somewhat, and it's not so bad. I left the gold along the bottom. I really like that. It kind of looks like it's elements along the river there or along the bottom of the Eiffel Tower. And then I do go back in with that original stencil, which I really liked, and I added some pathways, I suppose, with the stencil. Once more trying to ground that Eiffel Tower. I do like how the black peeks in from around the gold. That looks really good. And I do love the gold at the top of the page. I do love how the gold and the charm also give it an extra little bit of opulence, like Parisian opulence. And I think to myself, we are done. This is it. I am not touching this layout anymore. This is it. I've done enough damage for today. So thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I hope you had a little bit of a giggle watching my adventures and then watching me trying to salvage it. Would love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and I'll see you in my next video.